Welcome back to Engine Shop Joe. We're at part 8 of featuring the parameters. We're in the final stretch here, so let's get going and get this finished in the next, at most, three more sessions at most. Okay, let's go. We left that off at OEM ambient air temperature sensor. That's the sensor in the mirror or the outside the truck that tells the engine what the ambient air temperature is. If it has that sensor, it has after treatment for sure. OEM load-based speed controls just that. You can use a device or switch to control speed control by load. That could be engine speed. It could also be wheel speed. That's a specialty setting. You don't usually see it used on a regular truck, highway truck. Parking brake switch, it has one or doesn't. That just simply tells the ECM the parking brake switch is on or it's off. The earlier electronic engines didn't have that option, but they use that these days. It ties in with PTO and other special functions. Powertrain protection, you do not turn that on unless you understand what it is and how to set it. Typically that's turned on with the older Allison automatics so that you wouldn't rip a drive shaft out or blow the transmission up. If you had, say, you locked it in first gear and you're going up a steep hill and you're stuck in the mud, you could damage the transmission. You set torque ratings when you turn that on, and it limits the engine torque in whatever gear the engine senses the transmission's in. Powertrain protection, engine speed limit. Powertrain protection, if that's turned on, again, that ties in with torque and now engine speeds. You can control engine speed in certain gears, maximum engine speed in certain gears. PTO is a complex, very complex thing these days. What PTO is when the vehicle is sitting still and moving, but generally speaking, sitting still. You're sitting in the cab, you stopped, you got the brake set, you turn on the PTO switch and you hit set. Now instead of idling, the engine will go up to, say, 925 or 850, whatever you've got set, the set or resume switch set to. So the PTO is controlled by the cruise control switches. So when the vehicle is moving down the highway over usually 30 miles an hour, the cruise control switches do that. They control cruise control. When you were under 30 miles an hour or stopped, those cruise control switches are now the PTO switches. And PTO just means you can ramp up engine speed and it'll stay wherever you set it. You can use PTO just to fast idle the engine at night for the air conditioning or whatever. In the wintertime to keep it warmer. You can also use it to run a pump or a generator that's hooked up to a PTO that's bolted onto the transmission. You can set additional switch speed. You can set maximum PTO speed and load torque. That's the engine's allowed to make when you've got the PTO on. You can set the ramp rate, which is how fast the PTO accelerates from one speed to another when you hold the set or resume switch into the set or resume position. And then you've got a set switch speed, which you can set. When you set that, you've got a third speed switch you install. When you flip that switch on, it goes right to that speed. We're down at accelerator, pedal, or lever override. If that's turned on or enabled, if the PTO's set when you step on the accelerator, it will ramp up over that speed. If that's disabled, you can push the gas pedal down or accelerator down and nothing changes. Alternate operation is only turned on when you're usually in a fire truck or ambulance. When you turn on alternate operation, there is no set and resume speeds like the 800, 850, 925. It will always, when you turn that on, when you flip the PTO on, the engine stays at idle, and then you have to hold the set switch or hold the resume switch to set a resume to ramp the engine up. It will ramp up at whatever the ramp rate is set at. In this case, ramp rate was set at 250 RPMs a second. You can lower that or raise it. Cab PTO, if that's enabled, the ECM knows there's switches in the cab with the driver that he's using. If clutch override's enabled, you can push the clutch in and the PTO will kick off or back to idle. Ignore vehicle speed source in PTO. If that's enabled, you can drive the truck with the PTO engaged. Why would you do that? Well, maybe you have a sprayer and you're in a field and you want to spray while you're going 8 miles an hour. So you can set your PTO switch. It'll look at the 8 miles an hour. When you get to 8 miles an hour, it'll stay there, and it will, depending what your gear you're in, it'll run the engine at that RPM to run that pump. Okay, parking brake interlock, if that's enabled, there's a parking brake switch that tells the ECM the parking brake is on, and if it's not on, the PTO will not work. PTO pump mode is a complex setting, but basically that's turned on when the truck's drive shaft or main drive shaft is running a device. So you'd have a specialty transmission on it. A lot of times fire trucks will drive the main water pump with the actual drive shaft. And so they have to have PTO pump mode turned on, because if the drive shaft spins fast enough, the VSS sensor in the transmission is going to sense that there's too much road speed and kick the PTO out. And it will also disable the air shutoff valve, which is used as an emergency shutdown when you're in places where the engine could inhale combustible gas. So again, that's a specialty setting. You need to understand what you're doing with it. PTO speed adjustment, if that's enabled, you can override the 6 mile per hour and make it whatever you need it to be for your application. Remote PTO is considered to be a separate switch than the two cab switches we're talking about. It can be mounted in the cab, or a lot of times it'll be on the back of the machine. If you ever saw those trucks that have the big drills on them where they stand it up and they drill a vertical hole and the operator sits on a chair in the back of the truck, the back of the trailer or the bed of the truck, that would be a remote PTO switch. Remote PTO service brake and clutch override, same thing. Those two, the service brake or clutch, will override the remote PTO speed if that's turned on. Remote PTO station is a specialty thing. That's where you've got a set of switches like you have in the cab with on, off, and set and resume, but it's outside the cab. Service brake override, if that's turned on, anytime anybody hits the service brake, then it will kick off the PTO in remote PTO. Transmission-driven PTO, if that's turned on, that's when you have a secondary bolt-on on a transmission and it runs the PTO. Transmission neutral interlock, if that's enabled, then the ECM from an automatic transmission or smart transmission has to receive a data bus signal that the transmission's in neutral before it allow the PTO. Zero vehicle speed source limit. If you enable that, the PTO will ignore the command that, hey, don't engage because the vehicle is in motion. Remote PTO, remote accelerator pedal or lever, if you enable that, then it will look for a pedal or lever that changes variable PTO speed. I've seen those on the drills where the guy's drilling dirt and he can step on the throttle and make it drill a little bit faster if he wants to. It speeds the engine up. Okay, when we return next time, we're going to start with road speed governor. See you next time on Engine Shop Joe.